Hey guys, my name is Yasmina and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a little bit special and this is my 30,000 subscriber special, which is kind of crazy. So we hit 30,000 subscribers a couple of weeks ago and I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone, every single one of you who decided to subscribe to my little nerdy bookish corner of the internet. To celebrate this milestone, I decided to do something more focused on you guys and to do a video that is my subscribers' favorite books. So I asked you a few different times, what are your favorite books? And I asked you to tell me your top 3 if you couldn't pick just one. And from all the answers that I got, I compiled a list of the 10 best books according to you guys, and I also have 2 honorable mentions. And I ordered them based on the number of responses I got, so the more a book or a series was mentioned as someone's favorite, then the higher, in the list it will be. And yeah, I want to say that I can definitely tell that you guys are subscribed to me because a lot of these books, most of these books are also my favorite books. So I think we have pretty similar taste. So I think that's really cool. So without further ado, here are your 10 best favorite books of all time. First of all, I have 2 honorable mentions. The first one is not a book specifically, but it's an author. I have gotten a lot of responses for books by Haruki Murakami. It seems that you guys really enjoy this author. I didn't get multiple responses for one single book of his, but I got multiple responses of different books by him. And a couple of books by this author specifically that were mentioned was The Wyandotte Bird Chronicle and Kafka on the Shore. I really don't know much about Haruki Murakami, so I can't really add much to this, but it does seem like you guys really like this author, and I think in general a lot of people really like this author, so I'm definitely gonna try to give his books a shot soon, because I also really want to know why he's so popular and if I also will love his books as much as a lot of people do. And the other honorable mention I have is Stephen King. Again, a lot of different books by Stephen King, not a specific one, although it was mentioned a couple of times, but so were Pet Sematary and The Shining. So again, an author that a lot of people seem to really like, but I couldn't really get a concise answer as to one of his books being more popular than the other, so I just got a lot of different books by him as responses. But I have read it and I have read The Shining as well, actually, although I did not finish it. I love the movie adaptations by it, but I tried reading the book a few times and I could just never finish it. It just was a bit too much for me. But I did like The Shining. I also have Salem's Lot by him, which I have yet to read, but yeah, of course, Stephen King is a well-known and popular author, so I'm not surprised his name was mentioned here a lot. Alright, so those were the honorable mentions. So now let's get into the top 10 of your guys' favorite books. So at number 10, this is actually a book I only recently read. So luckily I can actually talk about it a bit more because I have now read it. And that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. So a few of you guys mentioned this as one of your favorite books. Now, of course, this is a classic horror novel, and I just released a video or a reading vlog of my only reading Dracula books in the month of October, which I will link in the cards and down in the description if you're interested. Suffice it to say, this was my least favorite Dracula book that I read in that reading vlog, which might be a bit surprising because it is the Dracula book, right? It's the book that started everything. The plot and, the mythology is phenomenal. I really, really like that aspect of it. And yeah, if you want to hear more of my thoughts on this book and some other Dracula books, go watch my October reading vlog because I think the other books were really fun and I would recommend those as well, especially if you like Dracula and have not heard of the other 2 books that I read. I recommend checking that out. At number 9 is also a book I read, I think about a month or 2 ago, so also very recently. And this is a gorgeous, gorgeous book, inside and out. And this is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. And I'm not sure how well you can see this cover, but this is gorgeous and it's filled with illustrations throughout the novel, and I also really, really love this. I just recently read it, so I don't know if I would yet put it in my top favorite books of all time, but I definitely really, really liked it. I think I gave it 5 stars if I'm not mistaken. This is a whimsical, fantastical novel about a middle-aged man who revisits his childhood. He goes back to a place he used to live when he was a child, and all of these memories come pouring back into him, and there's a lot of magical elements, I should say, about his memories. And I think it did such a great job of capturing that childish perspective. And reading this as an adult, you can definitely see all of the really, really dark undertones. But I think even children could read this and, they obviously might they will definitely miss a lot of the dark themes and dark undertones of this novel. But I think the writing style is so fantastic that both children and adults can read this and both get a lot out of it, albeit maybe different things out of it. So if you haven't read this novel, I would highly, highly recommend it. And generally, I'd recommend anything by Neil Gaiman. I'm on a mission to read everything he has written because he's definitely becoming one of my favorite authors. At number 8, we have definitely one of my favorite books of all time. So I definitely agree with you guys on this one, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I love this novel. This is such a magical, fantastical novel about a mysterious circus that turns up unannounced and then just as swiftly disappears in the middle of the night and reappears somewhere completely different, both in location and in time. I would say this is definitely a more literary fantasy novel. I think the writing is really beautiful. I've read this quite a long time ago, but I still have some very vivid memories of scenes in this book. And I don't really want to spoil more than that for you, but I would highly recommend this, especially if you're used to a lot of sort of epic medieval type fantasy settings, then I think this is definitely refreshing and different, and I would highly recommend it. At number 7, we have one of my favorite series of all time, although I will just show up one book, but I will just add this in as an entire series, and that is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn series, but I will just put the first era of the Mistborn series in here, so the first 3 books, because a few of you have mentioned a couple of the books in this series, so it wasn't just The Final Empire, it was the other books as well, so that's why I'm just putting it here as the entire series. Now, if you've watched my channel, you guys know I'm a massive Sanderson fangirl. I love everything he's ever written, and this was my introduction to Sanderson, the series was my introduction to Sanderson, and I think it's a fantastic introduction. And if you've heard of Brandon Sanderson's works and are not sure where to start, I always recommend starting with Mistborn, because I think there's something in this for everyone, and it's not as intimidating, it's not as epic endeavor as his Stormlight Archive series, for example, but I think it's meaty enough that, for any epic fantasy fan, you will definitely enjoy this. And again, I think it's refreshing and different. This is something that Sanderson, I think, does really, really well. He envisions very interesting different worlds and magic systems that you don't see very often or anywhere else in fantasy. At number 6, we have actually a sequel. I'll just show you what this is. This is Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. So this is actually the second book to the Six of Crows duology, but none of you mentioned Six of Crows. It was specifically Crooked Kingdom that was mentioned a few times as one of your favorite books, so I think that was interesting. And I'm not going to talk about the sequel specifically, just in case you haven't read the first book, but this series basically follows a massive heist, a said to be impossible heist, and this kind of ragtag team of unconventional heroes that come together to take on this challenge. I would say the magic and the world building in this is more subtle and definitely secondary to the characters and the intercharacter relationships going on. But I think if you want a fast-paced fantasy, this is YA as well. And if you're new to fantasy, then I think it's a great place to start because it's quite easy and quick to get through, and it's just a lot of fun. Like it was definitely a really fun series. At number 5, we have, of course, the series that will never escape our lives, and that is the Harry Potter series. But actually, surprisingly, it was Order of the Phoenix that was mentioned the most. I had also seen Goblet of Fire, which is my personal favorite, but by far Order of the Phoenix was mentioned the most, which I was a bit surprised because this is not my favorite. But you guys seem to really like it, and I think I can see why. Anyway, of course, the Harry Potter series. This had to be here. I'm not going to dwell on this one because I think everyone is aware of what this series is about, and it's definitely still one of my favorite series. The nostalgia aspect of it is real, and I think these days there are definitely better fantasy series out there. It's just, this one was always first in my heart, so it will always be up there somewhere. Next up, we have another epic fantasy series, and that is The Song of Ice and Fire, but A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords were definitely the two books that were mentioned the most. I think I agree, especially with A Clash of Kings. I remember really, really liking this one. It's been a long time since I read the series, so it's hard for me to remember what happened exactly in each book. This is one of my favorite series. I think in my old top 10 favorite fantasy books, I think this was on number 4. So actually, I think we're aligned. I am trying to stay optimistic and say that we will get Winds of Winter in the next few years, but at this point, it's literally been 10 years since A Dance of Dragons came out, and there's so many other incredible fantasy series that have cropped up since then, and in part because of this series, that in a way, the sort of urgency of wanting to have the next book in the series has definitely died down for me. But I mean, if it does come out, I'll obviously jump on it. I guess I'm not as invested in it as I was years and years ago, because there's just some incredible series out there these days. And if this is all you know, like if this is the only fantasy series you ever got into, honestly, look up modern epic fantasy because it'll blow your mind. Fantasy has been so good, especially in the last 5 years or so. There's such incredible stuff out there these days that I don't mind waiting for Winds of Winter. Basically, I don't think about it much because I have so many other incredible series to read until that hopefully will come out. Right, that was my little rant about the next book in Song of Ice and Fire. Moving on to number 3. So you guys' number 3 is actually my number 1 favorite book of all time. I talk about this book a lot, and similarly to A Song of Ice and Fire, I am also patiently, although less patiently than A Song of Ice and Fire, awaiting the final installment in this trilogy, and that is, of course, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is my favorite book of all time, and my favorite fantasy series of all time. Series being 2 books because, well, it's also been 10 years. It's been 10 years, guys. What is time? What even is time? I am more optimistic that we will get Doors of Stone in the next God knows how many years. I do hope we get it because there still has not been anything that has had the impact this had on me when I read it the first time. Aside from the Harry Potter series and the impact that had on me reading it as I grew up, this was the only other series that had a similar effect on me. This is just phenomenal. Like the writing is such beautiful writing, and it's also single character focused, so it's not multiple POV like a Song of Ice and Fire. We just follow one character, and I know some people don't like that main character, so of course you're not going to enjoy the story. but I like Roth, and I just find this world incredibly beautiful. The magic system is, again, really like in a Sanderson fashion. It's very logical, and it's a really cool magic system. I think Rothfuss is just fantastic at telling a really, really good story, which is why I'm really hoping we will get the third installment in this series soon-ish, please. Alrighty, at number 2, we also have, this was my number 3 in my top 10 best fantasy books video. I really need to make an update on that video, by the way, because it's been a few years. But anyway, this is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in the Stormlight Archive series. So you guys mentioned Words of Radiance, and you also mentioned Oathbringer. No one mentioned The Way of Kings, as far as I remember. But Words of Radiance is my personal favorite. I have only read the first 3, so I'm not yet caught up with Rhythm of War because, again, I need this paperback edition and it only comes out next summer. I'm okay with waiting because these books are literally massive. These are always the longest books I read. I know Oathbringer was 1,300 pages, and I think this is similar. Anyway, it's a chunker. It's a chunker, but I love every single page of all of these books. This is like a massive epic fantasy series. Like, the scope of this world is insane. And again, Sanderson is just so good at creating different worlds and magic systems. And there's a bunch in this. Like, it's not just one. There's a bunch of different things coming together in this world. And I love the characters. I love Kaladin. I love Shallan. It's definitely an undertaking, which is why I always recommend starting with Mistborn or other works by Sanderson, because this is definitely intimidating, especially if you are not used to reading big fat fantasy books. This is this is the definition of a big fat fantasy book. If you're not intimidated by it and you haven't picked the series up, like, I'm not the only one that pushes this book. Trust me, it's really genuinely really worth it. And Sanderson, is very, very different to both Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin in the sense that he is magic itself. He is a machine. The man is a machine. He releases books like it's nothing. And like I said, this is 1,300 pages, each of these volumes, and he has multiple series, multiple books coming out every single year. I still cannot process how that is possible. The man is a myth, is a legend. Just read his books. All right, so we are finally here at number 1. By far the most mentioned series that you guys commented on is, of course, the one and only, the classic, the father and mother, roughly speaking, of modern fantasy. That is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I actually have my Romanian edition that I used to read in my childhood. This is the first book. Don't know how you can see that cover, but look at it. It's so cute. I like to show these editions because I've never seen them anywhere else. I'll just say The Lord of the Rings because, of course, some of you may know that it was always meant to be just one book, but the publishers split it up into 3 installments because I guess they thought, at the time, one massive book would be too much for most people, and it probably would have been. Not these days, though, but yeah. You guys did mention Fellowship of the Ring and The Return of the King, but I just will put this here as The Lord of the Rings. This is my personal favorite. I always really love beginnings of epic quests. I think I love that concept of getting the band back together. I mean, this book sparked my love of getting the band back together. I am definitely not surprised that this is number 1 on this list. This is also one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, although I tend to prefer more modern fantasy these days. But obviously you can never replace this. It's just really good. Though I will say I prefer The Hobbit these days. If I do want to get back into that world, I usually either watch the movies or read The Hobbit, because I think The Hobbit is a much more, easily digestible book. Right, so these were your guys' top 10 favorite books, and most of these are also in my top 10 favorite books of all time. I really enjoyed that we do seem to have very similar tastes. I don't think that's surprising, but it's just kind of nice to see. Thank you so much for answering my question and participating, in making this video. I really, really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for 30,000 subscribers and just for sticking around. Really appreciate you guys engaging and letting me know your favorite books and just always just commenting on my videos and being a part of this little bookish community we have going on. And I think it's so cool, and I really enjoy talking books with you guys. So I hope we can continue to do that in the future. And if you didn't get to answer this question, if you didn't see any of my posts, then do leave your answers to what are your top 3 favorite books of all time in the comment section of this video, and maybe at some point I will do a part 2 if I get more answers and I can make another list down the line. So yeah, that was it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next time in a new video. Bye!